Hello everybody. I'm Tia Sainakshit and I welcome you all to Android Study Jam Session 1. I'll be the facilitator for Android Study Jams this year and I welcome you all to Android Study Jams. We'll be moving ahead. So today we'll be learning Unit 1. Okay, so this is Kotlin Basics for Android. You should be, we'll introduce you to Kotlin and we'll also do some hands-on sessions using Kotlin. We'll also look at some programs and we'll also do some, uh, we'll also learn a lot about Kotlin, why is it used, how is it used, etc. We'll also look at some of the prerequisites that we need in order to run these Kotlin programs successfully, the softwares we need, and all the prerequisites that we need. So let's just get started. Let's get rolling and let's get started. So, what are Android study jams? That's the first question that comes to our mind. So, Android study jams are a community basically organized study groups. So, they are study groups for people to do some hands-on learning for Android app development. Today, after we'll be looking at some of the concepts, we'll definitely do some hands-on um, tutorials as well. We'll be basically making the two such apps and we'll explore the particular tools that are required. So as of this session, I'll be using Android Studio, and the two programs that we'll study today are just for you to understand and get to know Kotlin better and get to know Android Studio better. So from the next session onwards, I'd like all of you also to install Android Studio and code parallelly with me. The resources to installing all these softwares and all the resources that are required to do the hands-on will be provided. Moving on. So these are some of the equipments that are needed for each and every student. You need to have a computer, a good internet connection, and an Android device. That's optional. So if you have an Android device, you can just connect it using the USB cable, and you can just configure a few settings in the settings app, and then it should be working fine. And also, you'll definitely need Android Studio. The link to Android Studio and all the resources will be shared. So Android Studio, as we've been talking till now, is the official tool to build Android apps, and this is what we'll be using throughout. And also, I'll be sharing my screen, and we'll be doing a few programs on Android Studio as well. Moving on. So this is the Android emulator. So let me introduce you to Android emulator. So basically, an Android emulator is nothing but a device on your computer itself. So let us assume that you don't have an Android phone, physical device, or for some reason you wish to not use your physical Android device. What you could do is you can basically install the emulator on your Android Studio, and you can, once after writing your logic, you can start basically executing programs on your Android emulator. So this is a very crucial tool, important tool if you don't have an iPhone, if you don't have an Android device. Let us assume you have iPhone, or let us assume that you don't want to use your Android emulator for some reason. You could always use the emulator. Moving on, so now we'll be discussing about user interface. So, as you all know, you've been using a lot of apps till now, and once you open the app, right? So the part of the app where the user interacts with, so you might see images, you might see text as shown in the left-hand side picture, or you might see images as shown in the right-hand side picture. And sometimes you might see even a combination of both, right? For example, let us take Times of India application, for example. There you can see photos as well as text. So both are present. So this is what basically comprises of the user interface. So it is the part of the app which is very visible and the user is in contact interaction with that part of the application. So this is about user interface. Moving on. So basically, for starting Android development, there are some prerequisites that you need to know. So, basic computer literacy, basic math skills, computer and headphones, internet connection, Android device, and a USB cable. So, these are some of the requirements if you want to basically start with this. Uh, I think we as engineering students have all these qualities from long back. So these are the learning objectives or the learning agendas that I have planned for this session or session one. So you're going to also build your first Android app in this session. You'll be setting up Android Studio on your computer. So you'll be looking at various definitions. You'll be understanding a lot of stuff, and you'll also be learning the basics of Kotlin programming. So why is Kotlin used and what are the advantages of Kotlin? And we'll also be building two apps, hands-on apps using Kotlin in this session itself. So moving on, so these are some of things that you will learn. So these are a list of things that I've compiled. So these list of things are the things that you're going to learn. So throughout this Android study jams, you will be well versed with all these topics at the end of your completion of your Android study jams lecture series. So you'll be introduced to Kotlin. You'll be creating your first app. You'll be looking at layouts. You'll be adding a button to an app. You'll be doing everything in this session itself. And throughout the course, you'll be doing a lot of other things as well, like getting user inputs, displaying a scrollable list, navigation between screens, intro to navigation component, architecture components. You'll be learning all these topics, coroutines, and getting and displaying data from the internet, etc. And on the right hand side, you can see badges. So Android, so this Android study jam session, so basically there is a syllabus and we'll be providing you the links to that after the session as well, where you can also go through all these syllabus, and once you finish the syllabus, you will be earning a particular badge. So if you could have come across quick labs previously, if you would have done the quick labs challenges, so once you finish a particular challenge, you are basically it's basically saying that yes, you are certified to do that particular task, right? Or you just learned the theory behind the task, or you know what's happening behind the particular task. So similarly, it works here as well. um, Once you go through all these basics, which you would be learning about everything by the time the entire Android study jams get over, you would be really familiar with such things, and you can actually start building your own apps as well, which would really help you in your fourth year project time as well. So this is the continuation of the units. So we'll be studying 15 such topics, and the description of each of them is also given here, and a screenshot of what is going to happen, or when we basically make that project, how would the screen appear? That's also given on the right hand side. And as I told in the previous slide, I discussed a little about badges. So just like in quick labs, when you finish a particular task, you are awarded a badge. Similarly, here, if you finish learning a particular module, you'll be assigned a badge, and you can basically that badge would be added to your Google developer profile. So using that, it would be really beneficial for you to basically just prove your mastery over all these topics. So that's the importance of badges. So now we'll start diving deep into the concepts of Kotlin and the things that you need to know. So let's start with layouts. So basically a layout is a structure for the user interface in your app. So layout is nothing but something that you define. You want your UI elements in the app to look in a particular way. So that's what layouts is about. So it basically defines the structure, as I told you, and all the elements in a layout are built using a hierarchy of view and view group. So view group is where you can have a lot of views under the view group, under a particular view group, and you can basically declare layouts in two ways. So there are two ways in which you can declare layouts. So you can declare layouts using XML, or you can just drag and drop elements in the runtime. So in order to better understand this particular concept, we'll also be looking at the hands-on sessions, like I discussed in the previous slide. So layout is nothing but a structure for a user interface in your app. So you want all the elements in your user interface to look in a certain way, and you want all the components also in your app to look in a certain way. So in order to display all your elements or all your components of an app in the mobile device in a certain way, you use layout. And we have discussed about the two ways in which layouts can be added into your device. So the view objects are usually called widgets. So just like in a library, you have certain books are kept in certain sections, right? So view objects can also be are usually called widgets because these are some of the tools that you would use. And like again, there are, as you can see in the first point, one of many subclasses such as button or text view. So these are some of the common elements that you would generally use when you're making your application. So this is about view objects and layouts. And then comes view group, right? And a view group is usually called layouts, can be one or many types that provide different layout structures such as linear layout or constraint layout. So this is the thing that we've been discussing in the previous slides also. So you want the components or elements of your user interface to look in a certain way when your end user is trying to use your application. So once your application is hosted on Play Store and when the user downloads your application, it's basically you who have to decide how the various elements like button or text view are going to appear on your user interface screen once the app is open. So that is about layouts. So like I told, the components in your user interface can be of many types. So linear layout, it can be, or it can be a constraint layout, or it can be any other kind of layouts as well. So that is about view groups and layouts. So each subclass of the view group class provides a unique way to display the views that you nest within it. So like I told, so it's basically telling the ways in which you can order all your components of an app in a certain way. It provides you in a unique way to display the views that you nest within it. So it's completely up to the developer to decide in what way he wants his components to basically appear on the screen. So until here, does anybody have any doubts? So I'll just summarize the things that we have studied till now. So we have basically studied layouts, and we've also discussed what is view and what is a view group, and elements such as button or text view are one such subclasses. And these view objects are also called widgets. So you can map this to, say, books in a library, for example. And layouts is basically the way in which a developer programs, you can say, or he wants his UI elements to appear to the end user or the person who's using the app. at the end of the day. In order to basically make the app really functionable and really working, he wants his UI elements like button or text view to appear in such a way. So there are apps with functionalities like, say, addition or subtraction. Let us consider a very simple example where you're making a calculator, right? And so for making a calculator, you would need elements such as button or text view, etc. And text view is where you'd be entering the numbers to add. And once the button is clicked, the addition operation has to perform. And it is basically the developer here now who decides how the UI elements would look like these text views, whether these text views would occupy the entire width of the screen, or would it just be placed below it, or would there be two text views which occupies exactly half the screens, or would there be two text views which on the left hand side occupies say 40% of the screen and on the right hand side occupies the rest of the screen, etc. So that's about layouts. So like I was just explaining you in the previous slides, now I think there is a better understanding of layouts, because here in the diagrams you can see how basically the buttons and images are laid out on the screen. So if you have a mobile device, it is laid out in such a manner. And if you're viewing the same app in a tablet, it is laid out in such a manner. So you can take Amazon.com also as an example. So when you look at Amazon.com on the Chrome browser, how does it look? On the mobile phone, how does it look? And when you're using an tab, how does it look on a tab? How the elements are placed on a tab? So, uh, so basically, the developer, whoever has been developing the application, has basically decided that the layout would be in certain ways when they are opened on, say, mobile, tablet, and laptop. And these are the views. And how would they look exactly? All these elements, those are views. So now I'm going to talk about buttons. So we are moving to the second part, and now we are going to talk about buttons. So a button is nothing but a user interface element or UI element. So we have been talking about many UI elements till now. We have been talking about buttons, we have been talking about text boxes. Basically, if you're using an application, these are the very basic components that you would need in order to basically run a particular application, be it calculator app or be it an app where you're collecting details of students. So let us assume that you are building an app on your mobile where you want to collect the information of students, such as their name, their address, and their bus route number, or let us say where they go to play, or any such information which has where the user has to write some text on a text box. So in Java, I think you might have learned in your semesters how to basically bring those elements into your console and uh, you know create programs. If the user wants to enter Aadhaar card number, for example, or address, or their father's and mother's name, or their birthday, etc. So all these UI elements can be basically developed by a developer in such a way that it has to look in a particular way when you're using your mobile phones, tablets, or laptops, as we've been discussing in the previous slides. So let's come to some technical details. So onClick is used to define the Kotlin function to be invoked when when the button is clicked, right? So what this means is that when you're actually clicking a button, the button has to do something, right? It doesn't make much meaning if the user is just clicking on the button and nothing exactly happens. So when the user clicks a button, some action has to happen. So let us just assume that we are basically making an application on our mobile. So let us assume that we are making an Gmail app, Gmail clone app. So where you want to basically send emails to people that you mentioned you want to send mails to. And once you write the title and once you also write the content of the email, there should be a button called send, right? So as developers, when you're designing an application, this comes under the design and the planning phase of your application. So you would have planned in such a way that the button has to be on the top left corner or on the bottom left corner or whatever it is. However, you are building the app, it should basically look in a particular way. So, for example, let us just compare, say, Outlook and Gmail, for example. So, when you are writing an email, on Gmail, it is on the bottom left corner. The send is in blue in color. And in Outlook, there is like a paper rocket kind of symbol which is present at the top left and also at the bottom. So there are two send buttons in Outlook when you carefully observe it. And there are again so many other features. So this is about buttons. So on click is used to define the Kotlin function to be invoked in the activity when a button is clicked, right? So when you click a button, some action has to happen. This on-click method is basically invoked. So the second point says the same thing. So it says the is a push button that is used to perform events on its click. If you click on it, the user or the end user or the developer basically expects something to happen, and it's a part of the widget.button class. So as I was saying, the library example, if you want to find a book of a particular genre, say science or say physics, first you go to the science section, and in the science section there is again physics, chemistry, and biology, and then you go to the physics section. So you can kind of imagine the hierarchy like this. So you go to the widget and then there is button class in it. So that's how that's where the button is basically. So until now, anybody has any doubts, I'll just summarize till what has happened till now. So we have learned about layouts. So we have seen how layouts work and how developers basically make use of layouts to display their UI buttons in particular way. Then we have also seen about buttons, and we have seen that it has to perform some kind of functionality. Now we'll be moving on to a hands-on activity. So we'll be basically making a dice rolling app. So I'll just open my Android Studio and I'll show exactly what is happening. So we have discussed about UI elements, right? So basically UI elements are basically here. So we saw button to be a UI element, and here I've put role basically, which means that when you're clicking on this button, the number or the dice should be rolling. So let us just say that you're playing a game like Ludo. So you want to basically roll the dice, and the number is again the number that appears on the text view is random. So here you can see in this component tree, you can see all the list of UI elements that you have basically dragged. Now, another point I would like to add is here you can see two elements. So these two elements, these two UI elements, you can see on the left hand side, that is in the component tree, you can see text view and you can see a button. Now, if you want to basically programmatically code this text view and button, you could also do that, because in applications where you want to build applications faster, you can't just keep dragging each and every element and keep placing it on the UI, right? So if you want to basically build an app fast and you know how to code these UI elements, they are automatically dragged into this UI section basically to see what you want to do. So for example, if I go to this section, like if I go to here, so I can see basically the code that is required to display that UI, that particular UI element on the screen. So we have text view here, we have a button here, and if you see the properties of these text view and buttons, you can see there is a unique ID that is provided to it. and this ID should be unique. This ID should not be resembling any other ID or ID of any other element in our UI window. That is one thing. And you can also position place where you want your button to be exactly on the app, right? So here is my constraint widget, and this is the layout I've been talking about in the previous slides as well. So we as developers can basically decide where we want to put that particular UI element, right? So from the text view, it is about 28, and from the left it is 158. Here it is 159, and down it is 279. So this is the kind of format that I'd like to have in my app. So that's the reason I've put it here. So once you install Android Studio in your computer, you can also basically play with them, and you can just explore with them, and you can just try dragging in buttons into your UI window and just do some experiments. And not only that, if I want to basically change the properties, I could just do it from here, right? I just have a very good user interface where developers are given the options to change the layout width, change the layout height, change the visibility, etc. But as you become an experienced developer in Android development, mostly you wouldn't be using this. You would directly just go to the code and start coding it off. So you can just bring a text view. So you can just say text view, and the same things that the same elements that we have seen here are basically here as well. So when you select that particular element, you can make changes over here. So the ID here is button. I have given it button. So you can change the ID as well. And once you change the ID here, automatically it gets updated in this code place as well. Activity main.xml is the file, and automatically changes are happening here as well. Once you change the any of these properties like layout width, layout height, layout constraint top to bottom off, and there are so many properties where which would pinpointedly give the developer, with accurate precision as to where he wants to place his element. So all that can be done. And here developers are given a very beautiful looking UI to make those changes. There is even split, which is basically a combination of both. Um, like if you want to keep coding and also see what the changes that are happening on runtime, you can do that as well. So these are about various properties. So you can change the layout width, layout height, margin start, margin top, margin end, margin bottom. You can also give a text. So this text is a very important attribute. It's what the user sees immediately. So you can basically set the text what it has to appear on the button. Here I've mentioned it role, and if I want to mention a different text as well, you can do that as well. And the ID for this particular element is button that we have given it. And basically what this app would do is, as I keep clicking on the role button, a different number keeps appearing on the text view. And the code or the business logic is basically written in the main activity.kt, which is the extension. So KT is standing here for Kotlin, and this is the extension. So when a basic Kotlin application is written, you have to import certain things like os.bundle, widget.button, and widget.textView. So we basically understood what importing button widgets and text view widgets mean. So let us assume you're in a library and you go to the science section and you want a particular physics book. So this is how it is. You can visualize it. So Android the library, widget the section, and button is the exact book that you want from that place. So this is one kind of hierarchy. So you can just go to that place, just like importing a lot of things in Java or C, right? So when you just say hash include stdio.h, you can just kind of map it to that. import android.os.bundle. So these are some of the very important operating system configuration files that you need to import into your Android device so as to perform some kind of application, so as to run some kind of application. Only if the operating system is loaded in your laptop, only then you could open Teams and talk to people, right? Without the operating system, nothing basically loads. So this is the package. So all these elements, if you see, are very similar to how Java programs are written, right? So once you start a Java project, the package.com. So package.com.example.wish. So this is the name of the project that you're giving. And when you instantiate a new Java project, also the same things happen. Now, basically, what you're doing here is you're basically making a value, right? You're basically instantiating. So just like Java again, you have dice. So dice is basically here, dice is calling this function. So like I told in the previous slides, you need to be having some understanding of basic Java. So this is a function called roll dice, and here dice function is called, and then it has to return any number between 1 to 6 in random. So it has to just return a particular value, and whatever value is returned, it is basically stored in this dice variable, or here you are declaring variables using VAL keyword. So I hope everyone is clear with the basics of Java. So if you are clear with basics of Java, this is really easy to understand. And dice.roll. So again, this function is called. Whatever result we are getting, right, after the rolling of the dice, that result is basically stored in this text view, right? And once it is stored in the text view, we are just displaying that text view. And this is one important thing to understand. Find view by ID r.id.text view. So what it's going to do is, so let us just take this library example again. Once you understand the basic working of this simple app, you would be able to understand even complex app. At least you would be able to understand what is basically written here, right? And r.id.text view. So R stands here for resources, and ID is again the ID that we discussed in the activity underscore main.xml, where each UI component is being given a particular ID, right? We had discussed that. And r.id.resources, again, you can map with that library example. Now it is going to basically find view by ID. So view is the elements, right, in that pictorial slide that we had shown you. So it's going to find that view, and it is going to look for that ID where the ID is TEXTVIDEW. So just remember the camel casing. So if you change the way these T and E are written, suppose if you make them capital letters, capital alphabets, they are not going to work. So just be very cautious with camel casing. It's quite important. And rightly so, if you see, if you go to the text view here, if you go to the text view here, and if you see the ID, it is exactly camel cased. It is TEXT, where T is small, and BIEW, where B is in caps. So it has to exactly search for r.id. So in the list of resources, or the list of resources of the UI elements that we have here, it is going to see for text view. And once it captures the text view, you wouldn't see any error. So this is about the app, and you can just run your app by pressing this play button, and it will run. So once it runs, like I told you, you can see your emulator here. For the people who don't have an emulator, you can just even connect your own Android device via an USB connection. You just need to go to settings and configure a few settings there. And once the settings are configured, you would be able to run the app as well. All the files would automatically be loaded in your Android device and you can run the app as well. Now, if you just roll, at one time we are getting one, at another time we are getting five, and so on. So this is basically how it's working. My Android is slightly slow here. So this is how it's basically working. But as we saw, we rightly so saw the output as well. So you could try this today or before the next session, you can just install Android Studio in your computers and try the same. So I'll just move on. So these are some of the views. So views need not be only text views like I previously mentioned. Views can be of many types. Views can be text views can be image views can be even buttons. So let us assume that you have an application or you're making a Times of India clone like we discussed previously. So in this Times of India clone, you will have images which is basically placed up and the description of it down, right? So what other Android apps you can think of? I'm coming up with InShots, say for example. So if you want to build an InShots clone, you can see the image view on the top half section and description in the bottom. So this is about views. Now, we'll also be basically looking into some more details, right, of the app that we just built. So this is the app that we built, and we saw the output as well. So I'll just explain a little bit in detail. So here, find view by ID. I think everyone has understood find view by ID here. So there are two more other important things that we need to know. And this is one important note that we need to know here. So the note is that we need to keep in mind is that Android automatically assigns ID numbers to the resources in your app. So this is one important thing. And the other important thing that we really need to remember here is when it assigns an object to a variable, right? Kotlin doesn't copy the entire object each time. So what it does is it basically saves the reference to the object. So using this dice here, we are actually instantiating object of the capital D dice class. So so this is again a very simple concept when you learn Java in detail. So you have a class and you're basically creating an object to the class. So let us assume that we have an animal class, and in the animal class we have different animals, right? Like say lion and tigers and other animals as well. Now, in order to access the methods or the variables of the class that we have created, in our case, class animals, we have to basically instantiate objects so that we are able to access those methods and we are also able to access those methods or variables that we have instantiated in the initial class, right? For example, let us assume that we have created a class called animals, and in the animals class, we have, say, lions, tigers, and cheetahs, and say, buffaloes, for example. Now, I also have a method, say, and say, let us assume cows also as an example. So, I have a method called, say, cow eats grass. And now, in order to basically use this method, what am I going to do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to instantiate an object of that class. So I'll say animal A is equal to new animal, and using this A object, I can basically access any of those methods of the initial class that I created. So I can say A dot cow eats grass to basically access the block of code which is present inside that function. So these are some of the prerequisites that you need to know. when you're basically performing a complex app. And now I'll be talking about how to get user inputs in an app. So today we are basically seeing what is the use of text views. We've also seen what is the use of buttons, and we've also basically experimented on that. We have seen the properties of those, and we've also seen uh, what ID is, how an unique identifier is basically assigned to each of these components of our application, and etc. Now we'll just take things a step further and we'll discuss about how to get user inputs in an app, right? So many a times for certain applications, users have to type in a particular value manually to perform operations. So a calculator application is a very good example of the same. So in if you're basically building a calculator or you're using any other app also like Amazon, for example, and you want to basically search for a particular product. So what you do is you go to the search bar and then type the particular thing that you're searching for. So let us say you're buying a keyboard, so you'd be typing keyboard there, or let us say you want to buy headphones, you'd be typing headphones there. So it's a very common application where you want to basically search for a particular thing, or you want to give an input, and you also have a determined particular output. So there is a certain determined output for the input users of a particular application give. So let us assume that we are making this calculator application itself, and you say 2 plus 3, right? So when you're saying 2 plus 3, there is already a determined output. So you want the calculator to calculate the value and give it as 5, right? So that's the determined output that I'm talking about here. And even when you type, say, keyboard or any other thing on Amazon, so it has to display a list of keyboards. So you kind of already know what's the output there. So that output is determined. So that's what the third point says. We'll just introduce you to scrollable list in this session. So scrollable list is again just a list. So it's common to make lists for all sort of situations in everyday life, right? So you have a wish list, you have a grocery list, you have so many different kinds of lists. So if you're going, you have a shopping list, and you have a list of books that you want to buy, or you have a list of holiday destinations you want to visit, etc. So learning how to create and use lists is an important programming concept to add in your toolbox. So especially if you're becoming an Android developer, it is very essential to use lists. And even from a interview perspective, it's a very important concept that you need to know how to make lists and how to use lists effectively. So in programming as well, lists are also very useful. For example, there could be a list of news articles. So from the beginning of the lecture, we have been discussing various points about Times of India app or Instructor app. So all these lists of news articles when you are basically loading it in your mobile application. So um, the other example that you can imagine is also Medium app, where the blogs are basically loaded in a list, and it's curated such that the content of those list applications are basically the content that you read on a daily basis, right? Or a list of calendar events or social media posts with an app. So there are so many kinds of places. There are so many places in which lists are applicable and are very useful. So I've introduced you to scrollable lists now, and in the next forthcoming session, we'd be basically start off with um, doing a very simple program on lists, and we'll also see how they actually work and how to code them. But for now, we'll just do a quick hands-on activity. So the hands-on activity is going to be basically a simple calculator that we are going to make. And we are going to make this simple calculator using buttons and text views we have been learning all this session. So I'll just share my Android Studio again. So this is again slightly complex because I have included many linear layouts here. As you can see on the component tree, there is one linear layout, and under those linear layouts, there are so many other linear layouts, right? So there are about 4 or 5 linear layouts here. Actually, it doesn't make much sense if you keep dragging and dropping, going to layouts and dragging and dropping linear layouts. So what I did was we also discussed about the code part here, and we've discussed about um, linear layouts here. So this is the main linear layout. And under that linear layout, there are so many other linear layouts like this and this. So these are some of the children linear layouts. And like I told in the previous slides, these are some of the elements that we could also drag and drop. And if you want to change the properties of these elements, you can do it here on the right hand side, where you're being provided so many text boxes and you can keep manually changing them. But as you are becoming more matured with programming in Kotlin and using Android Studio, you generally developers prefer just coding them out. So they have basically a text view and an edit text. So in this text view, number 1 is red. There is another text view where the second number is red, number 2 is red, and then there is another text view where total is being displayed. And then you could, once you click on OK, the addition operation basically happens, and the total is basically displayed over here. The reason for taking this particular simple application is for understanding layouts and these UI elements thoroughly, and just not to get confused when we have 6 to 7 layouts and many buttons and many UI elements all in the same application. So from a design perspective, it's a very simple design. You have a text view which says just add 2 numbers. You can also extend this particular application to perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and even finding the percentage, that is the remainder of a number. So as I go to main activity.kt, so again, I hope all these things are very familiar to you. You can find view by ID. So in the r.id, so resources.id.ed1 as edit text. So when you look at these edit text elements, we have ID here as ed1, and here this element has ed2, and this element has ed3. So each of these text view elements, each of these edit text elements have a particular ID associated with it, and in the code we are just assigning variables to each of those, and we are basically assigning those variables, which means that num1, num2, tot, b1, b2, everything is bound or binding. So we can call this in Android terms as binding. They are all bound to all such elements. And the business logic of this application is very simple. You're just adding value 1 and value 2. So since that is an edit text, what happens is that only text input it accepts. So since it's accepting only text input, that text you're basically converting it to string, and then you're converting to int. So the reason why you're doing all these steps is because once it is in integer, only then additions can be performed. So when you're actually typing, it takes in text. So it does not basically realize that you're giving it numbers. So it thinks that you're giving it some kind of text, and the rest of the business logic of this application is really simple. So that's about the application. And if you run this application, exactly how you desired your UI elements to appear on the screen, it appears. So this is the previous application called Wish that we had made, where we were basically making those dice rolling application. So you can just give in 2 numbers here, say 12 and for example. And once you give this application 2 numbers here, you can just get the total here as we see. The application logic is very simple, but I hope you understood the concept behind it. So once you understood the concept behind it, you can create really complex applications with this. So just to summarize everything, here we are using import statements to basically import operating systems and widgets. Just compare that to your library example. And each of these elements have something called as ID, and each ID is again unique. And like we mentioned, Android Studio basically gives a number, ID number to it. And when you're binding these with variables, you're just going to use find view by ID, which is going to bind that ID or that particular element to this variable. And once that is done, uh, since text is coming there, you're basically converting that to integer. And why are we converting that to integer? These two steps are done because only then the addition operation can be performed. And the business logic is really simple, which is just adding those two numbers. And then the set text is nothing but to set that particular value. So when you're setting that text on that edit text, again, you're converting that to string so that it's not displaying some kind of value. So edit text, basically, you want to display text on that. So that's about the application. So if you have any doubts regarding any of them, you can ask it here. And in the next session, we would be basically discussing and doing a very simple program about scrollable lists, and we'll be exploring some programs on it. So I hope for this session, you understood what are layout, you understood how to drag them in, you understood IDs, you understood the various properties of it, and you also created a simple dice game, and you understood how to create a very simple calculator, additional calculator, and you can basically extend it to other functionalities as well. And if you have any doubts, you can ask it here, or else we can wrap it off.
Yes, Rakshit, we have a doubt from Alok in the chat that says, what topic should I master in Java in order to develop Android apps?
Sure, Alok, that's a very good question as such. So, some of the topics that you would need to understand is it would be really good if you understand some basics of Java. So, I had also done a course on Android development, and the roadmap that I followed was I understood Java concepts initially. I deep dived into Java and did some Java applications, and then I read a lot of documentation. So moving into Android was quite difficult in the start, but then it's just about increasing your knowledge and researching more on it. So right now, as such, we haven't done anything in Java. I've basically just told you to compare it with Java. Until now, we were doing actually Kotlin applications. So we were using Kotlin as the thing to write down the logic. That's why it had been written .kt extension. We basically made the files with the .kt extension. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question. If you wanted to do in Java, I think even Vinayak has also provided a link. So the link is really helpful, and yeah, thank you for the link again, Vinayak. So you could also just watch the video called Introduction to Java by our team. So um, you can get to know more aspects into Java. So I hope I've answered your question, and I think we can wrap up the session.